You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
We are continuing the Set Apart to Serve series as we encourage young people to consider church work vocations. Joining us today, Glenn Rollins. He's manager for Set Apart to Serve. Glenn, welcome to The Coffee Hour.
Thanks. Great to be here.
It's nice to have you on, team. You're fairly new to the LCMS International Center and Set Apart to Serve, but not new to church work in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So tell us about your journey to becoming a church worker.
Well, it was back in the last century, so it's a little bit ago. And I was actually kind of thinking about that a little bit as we got ready for this, and also thinking about it because this past few days, I was in Concordia, Nebraska, with a conference of Lutheran high school administrators and kind of thinking about how I got to that point. But grew up in various cities in Colorado, mostly in the Denver area, but then finished up high school in a small town on the prairies of southeast Colorado, little town called Wiley, about 400 people there. My church was in a differing town there, but it actually started for me. I think the Lord was working when I was in confirmation at Hope Lutheran Church in Aurora, Colorado. And that's where my pastor there first started talking to me about going to church work. And that was back in 1960 something. After time in Aurora, we, as I said, moved down to southeast Colorado. And my pastor there was also involving church work for me. And he actually set up, and that's far southeast Colorado, but he set up to have an admissions person from Concordia Seward come out and visit. And I had always thought I was going to go to a state school in Colorado, but the Lord and my pastor and this admissions person, I think, changed my mind. And one of the things that I've come to look at in retrospect was it was pretty awesome to have someone actually really interested in having me come to that school, to that place. And my pastor was interested in me going to seminary eventually, but things turned out a little bit differently. And as I said, this weekend I was with other Lutheran high school principals that I had worked with before coming to Set Apart to Serve. And somebody told this story that they'd had a similar experience. They had gone to Seward, not sure that they wanted to get into church work. But during that time there, something clicked about serving the Lord. And I was the same. I didn't know that I was going to go into church work. I went to Seward because that was where I was being kind of pulled towards. But something clicked about serving the Lord through vocation in the Lutheran Christian education area. And I was able to be an athlete of running cross country and track. I got really interested in coaching. And one of the best ways to maintain yourself as a coach is to also teach. So I kind of migrated to teaching during that time as well. So that's kind of how the Lord helped me to get to where I was. But it was through the influence of a couple of pastors who really took that thought. They saw something in me and wanted me to be part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us more about these church workers who encouraged you and how that encouragement made a difference for you?
Well, I probably don't dwell on it a lot, but it was a divorce situation with my mom and biological father, and so didn't have that male figure around in my life. So I'm guessing, and I haven't completely dissected it. But I'm guessing, when you have those two men who are so important, and it's not just to me, but they're leading the church that I go to, that I think that was something to not so much pause for the first event during confirmation. I remember it, but I don't know that it had as much of an impact as Pastor did in southeastern Colorado. And so I think, we look up to these figures, and in this case, both of them pastors, and they, as people of influence, and we're using that terminology at Set Apart to Serve, as people of influence, that does have something, whether you come from a family without, a traditional family in that regard or whatever, that there's are important people. And I think too, this is something I've seen in my ministry when I was principal and teaching, is we are created, I believe, to want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And there's a great opportunity to become part of something bigger than yourself and work for the church. So I think there was maybe some element of that. Instead of a Neb State College in Colorado, you can go to this place. Yes, in Nebraska, you've never been there, but you can go there and indeed be part of this, well, really was becoming part of the church in a different way, but it's something where you belong. And that's really an important motivator, I think. I don't know that those two pastors saw it that way. They wanted me to, as I said, go down the pre-sem route and move to be a pastor. But it still is that concept of saying, there is something that we see in you that is going to be able to make a difference. And you ought to think about that. And again, the second time in high school, it was so much that he brought somebody from Concordia Seward there. So, the Lord's at work in all of this. The Holy Spirit is pushing along, but we have roles in it as well. And that's what as I look back, I see the roles of those two men in their work that way. So.
And that was kind of my next question. When did you start to see that those people of influence in your life were key in you considering Concordia Seward, Nebraska, and considering church work? When did it really start to make sense that you started to see that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been over these last 10 years or so when I've been really interested in what is involved with this whole project. And it probably, as I look back on it, see that when I started to care about what was happening with my own sons and they're being pursued to go into college, I started thinking back towards what happened with me and seeing it with a different perspective there. So that's I think the challenge that I was able to get to see at that point is that they were involved through the Lord's work, but it became so much more real with my sons as they were grappling with what was going to happen with them. So I hear that story now more and more. I mean, I'm involved in this now in a whole different way, but I also know that my colleagues talk about that as well.
So you were in a high school setting for a while. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. Most of my ministry has been in high schools. There have been a few times that I've been in Lutheran grade schools. My first call was to a Lutheran grade school out in Southern California. And I was actually at that call for the first semester. And then at the local Lutheran high school, which is Laverne Lutheran in Pomona, California, at semester, they needed somebody in social science. And that was my area. And they needed somebody to coach track. And that's what I wanted to do. And so my principal said, "You've got to go." And so in the middle of the year, I switched from the grade school to Laverne Lutheran there. That started me being mostly in Lutheran high schools, but I've been, the Lord has placed me in a number of different places around, mostly the western half of the country. But I actually was able to teach at Concord Lutheran School in Pagedale, right? Like close to St. Louis there in St. Louis. The school is sadly no longer there, but it was an inner city experience. And I was there for a couple of years, had some good connection with Lutheran North at that time. But most of the time has been in Lutheran high schools. When I was at what was Minneapolis Lutheran up in the Twin Cities, that's when I decided to get into administration. So that was in the early 90s. And we were able to, I was there for 6 years at Minneapolis Lutheran, and there were 5 different principals during that time. So it became kind of obvious that it seemed like almost anybody can jump in at least for a year to be a principal. So I went and got my master's and started down that road. I was blessed to be at Faith Lutheran in Las Vegas for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007. There's a tremendous amount of growth, but I also got to grow myself as learning about being a principal. And then, as I talked about, also our oldest sons both graduated from there, and that really brings to mind about that whole thing about what are they going to do for college and beyond that. So, but I've been, like I said, blessed to be many places around the country and learned a lot, and then have been able to share in those different things that way.
So in all that teaching and administration experience, what were you able to experience kind of on the flip side of being able to encourage the young people that you were working with to think about these different vocations in their...
Again, I think it wasn't until I saw about my own sons and how they were making up their minds about what they wanted to do that I really saw the importance, even though it happened to me. It wasn't until I saw about that importance of that time frame for young people to make those decisions. I think especially this past 5 to 7 years, and our sons have been out since then, but past 5 to 7 years as an administrator, and you're trying to find teachers, each year, fewer and fewer that are out there. And by saying find teachers, automatically my mind is, of course, it's someone that's synodically trained. Of course, it's someone who knows what we are about in Lutheran schools. And it's been of course, more challenging all the time. I just was, again, talking with some of my former colleagues, if you will, and it's just amazing what some of them are going through with that. With young people, that the past few years, what I've started working on is just something really, really simple. And that's that I can't do this by myself, but our faculty would take time in faculty meetings, and not every faculty meeting, but often in faculty meetings, to talk about who are those young people that we see could be the people who'd want to be at a Concordian, be involved in possibly becoming a church worker. My theory with that was that it was perhaps the village would make a sense at raising this, encouraging, cultivating these young people. It was good if I could go and talk with them, but it's much better if there are a whole bunch of us who are watching out to see how Johnny is doing, and maybe encouraging here and there to build that person up. Although I do have to tell you, once, if a name is brought up and that young person is talked about at faculty, is we really see that they might have that something that fits for possible church work down the road, I would bring the young person into my office and just let them know, by the way, no pressure, but there was a teacher who said, you might be somebody who in the future would perhaps be a church worker for our church. And sometimes it was for kids who were maybe not denominational and going to do something else, but they still needed to know that the Lutheran teachers here said, wow, they might have that ability and skill and possibility. So one of the things that would happen is they were just like, really? They have just a funny look on their face. And then there's kind of a smile, because that there's a connection there in that way that they hadn't maybe even thought about before. So that's just a really simple way that it was taken care of by the whole. And also then I got the whole faculty talking about that too. So that was kind of fun for that.
We're talking with Glenn Rollins, manager for Set Apart to Serve with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, encouraging young people to consider church work vocations. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. We'll learn more about the need for church workers in the future. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason, to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
Today we're talking with Glenn Rollins. He's manager for Set Apart to Serve, encouraging young people to consider church work vocations in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So Glenn, you shared with us the story of how you became a church worker, the people of influence in your life that encouraged you along the way, and then as a church worker, how you were given the opportunity along with your colleagues to encourage young people to consider church work vocations by identifying students with gifts that would be certainly very meaningful in church work vocations. You shared with us earlier as a teacher and as an administrator the growing need for church workers now and in the future. Can you paint a picture for us, help us understand what that need for church workers is now and what we anticipate in the future?
Well, I mean, you can look at numbers. I don't know that completely tells the story. The stats are out there, but perhaps the biggest thing is whether you're talking about in education, we are in some really critical areas. We don't have those teachers for that. On the other hand, at my congregation here at Trinity in Springfield, we have been without an assistant pastor for months, and I know that is taking, quite honestly, a toll on my pastor. And that can't, we know that that's happening across Synod in many, many places. So the need for Set Apart to Serve is so great, and it's going to take a little while to ramp up, but we've got some things that we are working on for, I guess, programmatic that I believe are going to make a difference. But we do have to have the whole of the church involved. And that's exciting to me, that we're looking at a way to get everybody from, the pastors and teachers, deaconesses, DCEs, you name all of the different vocations, plus the laity to get involved in some of these things. And so on the horizon here, we've got some areas projects that I'm working on and working with Pastor Bonnick on, that are really exciting. And that's what's going to need to be part of our focused answer to the future, because the numbers are dwindling. There's no doubt.
So talking about getting all of the people on board at a church, how do all of these different church workers in a congregational setting or in a school setting work together as partners to foster this community of encouraging these vocations for young people and really showing that this is a good and an honorable and a worthy vocation for these children to consider?
I'd like to use the model, and I hope to be able to in our pilot program, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I'd like to be able to think that the concept that I used with faculty meetings, that there is going to need to be a coming together of those workers at that ministry to intentionally talk about it, to not just put it on that. And we would do this in the olden days, at least for me, whatever the olden days means. We would say in August, we would say, hey, we need to work on this. Let's think about this year that we talked to those kids. And then it would be June for the final meetings. And we'd say, okay, do we have anybody? That's why we became very intentional about, in every other meeting, basically is what it was, taking time to talk about, are there others? What's going on with those young people? And that's, I think, is going to be one of those key best practices for our ministries, is to intentionally take time, some segment of that, once a month, whatever it is who are those young people, or second career is going to be part of our program as well. but who are those people out there who we should work with? Our pilot program project that we have going on, that's going to be one of the areas that I'm going to strongly encourage there. Now, if you have that rural church with a pastor and probably not even somebody who answers phones except for on, Monday through Thursday mornings, it's going to be a little harder to have that group meeting to talk about who that is. But we still want to put that in their mind is it needs to be a regular, intentional time of reviewing who are those potential young people and then following up with them to energize those kids as well. But the pilot project, and that's exciting in that there are 35 ministries from around the Synod that we are going to be working with to work on those, as I said, best practices. And we're working with the Standing Partnership Group to kind of put together some toolbox for each of them. But one of the keys is making sure that we are constantly in contact with them to keep them encouraged to find those ways that work in their ministry, because these are going to be rural and urban and inner city and schools and high schools and all different aspects of the ministries that we have, and working with them over the next year to really be intentional about seeking out who are those young people and finding the best ways that we can make sure that they have a good thought about vocation and how to carry that through until they are enrolled in one of our Concordias for church work. And that's part of the plan with the pilot programs that we're putting in. It's an awful lot about networking, just like St. Paul did. He networked all around the Mediterranean, and that's what we want to do. And eventually we'll take those best practices then and share them with the entirety of the Synod. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that pilot program in the next weeks. Plus, we also have been blessed to begin work in a partnership with Lutheran Church Extension Fund and Concordia Publishing House to create curriculums about the importance of vocation and church work vocations. Of course, for these curriculums will be shared with all 1,200 of our Lutheran schools in our church, from early childhood centers up to Lutheran high schools. Martin Luther did a little bit of talking about vocation, and we're going to build on that. There's a lot of work in that project, but it's really exciting that LCEF and CPH are jumping into this work with us. So there's a lot of different things that are percolating because there is a big need. And there's an important aspect to this that goes very much to the foundational aspects of how our church works with his workers out in this harvest.
Thanks for sharing those plans for the pilot opportunities that are going on in this year. I want to go back to some of your examples from when you were in the high school and leading your colleagues in meetings, asking that question: who are the young people? Who are the students where we see some potential for being future church workers? What was the next step after you identified them? What was the next step for you or for the teachers? How did you then, the students, where you saw those gifts or that potential?
As I said, we would regularly meet, and what I was hearing from teachers is that they would maybe take a little bit more time talking with those young people. This year, of course, I'm not there, but the idea was that we would then put together and work with our Concordias about visits and having young people go to our Concordias. There are a couple of Concordias who do that regularly, and we wanted to make sure that we locked into that and help the young people to see what was going on at Concordias in a different way than just hearing about it, because there is a lot of competition for that college perspective. So that was the next stage that we were going to be working on. But of course, then I took a call here, and so I leave it to my colleagues at the high school. But it's the most thing was to keep talking to those young people and let it happen organically in the classrooms. When a teacher who knew a young person was interested would maybe find that time to add and help them during their time of regular class. That was to be encouraging in that way.
Very good. Our guest today is Glenn Rollins. He's the manager for Set Apart to Serve with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, encouraging young people to consider church work vocations. Glenn, thank you so much for being our guest and continue this conversation about Set Apart to Serve with us on the Coffee Hour.
You're welcome. It's exciting, and I'm thankful and just really thankful to the Lord for being able to be part of this as I kind of change in my career and look to finish up by some service to the broader church and for the future of the church.
You've been listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@kfuo.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.